Hey everybody, welcome to the Facebook page of Faith United Methodist Church and YouTube. My name is Jack Teroni, and I'm the pastor of Faith United Methodist Church in the Stroudsburg area. And this is Faith Talks, where we're once again diving into some of the most important and pressing questions of our faith. We're trying to understand our relationship with God and with Jesus Christ better this day than we ever have before. And I pray that that might be a reality for you too, watching this at this point and with these videos that I'm doing. Usually you see me recording these videos in my office at the church, but I had a bit of a different schedule this week. So I'm currently recording this video from my home in the town of Knowlton, New Jersey, and everything. And so, I just wanted to be sure to find a good background and everything, an atmosphere to sit down and do this in. But still, that doesn't mean we're going to stop making these videos and everything. And I'm particularly recording this video today in a different way because I was not planning on addressing the topic that I have for us today. I was originally going to talk about our current sermon series at Faith United Methodist Church called Social Faith, where we're talking about, some of the ways that we can live out our faith as Christians online and on social media, in digital spaces and everything, and so many other ways like that. And I look forward to doing that in, the future weeks and still working on that for the sermon series that we're in. And I would invite you to join us if you're looking to do or learn a little bit more about that in that regard, or just, ask the question, how do I live out my Christian identity online? That's going to be a great topic we could have. But I am going to talk about something that I just felt called to respond to because recently I had received a message from a nice lady on Facebook who kind of has been watching these videos and tracked me down. And she sent me a message that she was really going through a hard time right now, especially with the news that we are seeing in the United States right now. If you're in touch with the new current events and the news in the United States, you'll know that there are some devastating floods going on down in Texas in the state that I believe I just checked before I started this video have left about 94 people dead, and about 27 of those people were campers and counselors from Camp Mystic, which was a all-girls Christian camp down in Texas and some of the counties that were affected. 27 of these people have been recovered, and I believe there were still a couple dozen that are missing or unaccounted for at this time, and just dominated the news this weekend. And it was just so devastating. We prayed for them on Sunday, our worship services on July 6th, and everything. And a lot of people are going through a hard time or just seeing this and, just left with so much despair and everything. And so this lady, was feeling that. And she reached out and sent me something along the lines of, Pastor Jack, I had a death in my family, the death of my son at about 10 years old from cancer, almost 4 years ago, I believe. I don't have the official, the whole message right in front of me, but some not too long ago, some years ago in the last 4 years, her son died of cancer. And she said, Pastor Jack, I'm struggling with the question of how we can claim there's a God when you see the death of a child. As I'm reading all of these terrible reports about Texas right now, all of these thoughts are coming back up inside my head and causing me a lot of pain. How would you respond to this? That's a tough one. That question is not some kind of abstract or, imagined question. That is raw and it is real and something that we should be asking ourselves as Christians right now. If you've ever asked this question or felt your faith in God shake in the face of suffering, first of all, you're not alone. I have gone through this myself. Every minister has, in some way, shape, or form, in their lives too. And if they haven't, I got to tell you, this is just my personal opinion, but I feel that's a bit of an exaggeration. I feel we all have gone through this in some way, shape, or form, where we've had to ask God questions like, why? Why does this happen? How could God allow for the death of a beautiful, innocent child, especially right now with these, kids who we're reading about who were at a Christian camp, these wonderful, I got to imagine wonderful, beautiful girls who are there to celebrate God's beauty and God's creation in the, wilderness or whatever, and, trying to build their faith in that way. And now to have their lives lost in this way, I can imagine a lot of families in that area and elsewhere right now are grappling with this very question. Or, those like this woman who reached out to me who is having all these feelings coming up inside of her after losing the death, after losing her son, and everything. That has got to be hard. It's um, important that we sit with that question. And these aren't going to be easy answers, but I pray that they will be with honest hope. So let's address that question first. How could God let this happen? It's not just a question, it's a cry, it's a protest, it's a prayer. And when we witness the death of a child or any really senseless tragedy, it kind of cuts at the very core of what we think a good world should be, right? It does, and it is. And if God is all powerful, all knowing, and all good, how can suffering, like this exist? As I said, the question is not new. People have asked it for millennia, and I wrote this down because it's in the Bible. Don't think it is? Look in Psalm 13 and read all of Psalm 13 in the Psalms, because the psalmist in this particular chapter cries out, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever?" Sounds like a cry for help to me. We see it in the book of Job when a man, loses everything, right? And he cries out for answers. When people say, "I can't believe in God because of the evil of this world," trust me, I get that. As a pastor, I grapple with that myself sometimes. Truly, I do. And sometimes I've cried out to God and say, "God, why? Please help me to see," right? Why did my friend get cancer? Why did this abuse happen? Why did that overdose take someone so young and beautiful? Why do we kill each other over, whatever, race, borders, land, religion? Why the war, God? It can feel like God isn't powerful enough to stop it, or, God just doesn't care enough to try, or the conclusion that many have reached, it can't, all of this can't because that kind of God doesn't exist, right? And that's something we have to grapple, with too, or change the narrative on as Christians, because I don't believe that. I don't believe that this God that love doesn't, that doesn't care enough about us does exist. He does, and he absolutely loves us with all that he possibly can. And there are Christians in the Bible and all throughout human history who suffered greatly, and even in that suffering chose to still believe. And why? Well, a truth, that has been shaped in one way, shape, or form all throughout, the time of ministry and, church and theology, is that we do not worship a God who is far from suffering. Instead, we worship a God who has entered it. So when people say, "How can God allow, the death of a child?" Or, "Where is God in the midst of the death of a child?" In some way, shape, or form, I respond with what I believe, and that is that because God lost his child too. God only had one son, and he gave him up. God has a child who died for us. Romans 8, verse 32, you can turn to it if you have a Bible open, says, let me pull it up so that I can say it right and, speak it right. I don't want to, just paraphrase it or get it wrong. Romans 8:32, he who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also graciously give us all things? Right? One way you could say it is that God did not safely sit in heaven while we all suffered below. God stepped into, the overall, message of the, the Gospels and everything, those who were closest with Jesus, is that through him, God stepped into our pain, right? God stepped into the injustice and into the brokenness of the world through Jesus. At the very center of our Christian faith is not a throne of gold. Again, what is it? I've taken this out before. It's a cross. That's how it was revealed to us that way. A Roman execution tool is what this was, a symbol of suffering until Jesus, a place where the innocent one died, God's only son. And if you've ever stood at the grave of a child, know this, that that God has too. God has been there. And some people will still choose to reject that notion. That there's, no possible way, or they imagine God differently or anything along those lines. But, again, I want to remind you that God is prevenient that way. We believe that in United Methodist teachings, the teachings of our church and everything. I always value that idea that John Wesley preached a lot about of prevenient grace, right? It was the belief that God's grace goes long before us, long ahead of us, before we even know it or who God is, right? It means that God is present with us even in the womb, even in childhood, even in tragedy, even in aging throughout our life, even in death, even when we don't see him, even when we don't feel him, with us, even when the world is falling apart, right? God is there working, grieving, weeping with us, and somehow still redeeming. So where was God when the waters rose at Camp Mystic and in Texas, in Texas? Well, uh, I believe that God was with every child. I believe that God was not the cause of the flood. I believe that, God instead was holding hands or, being with all the ones who were terrified. God was weeping with the parents. God was welcoming those who were lost into eternal arms. And I truly believe that if we can be the hands and feet of Jesus as we strive to be as Christians, right? All those who claim to profess belief in Jesus and in God in some way, when we become that, no tear will go unnoticed. Not one person or name will be forgotten, and not one death was meaningless to God. Again, some will not accept that. And I understand, the hesitancy, or, maybe you need time to grapple with that thought. It is hard, and it is a hard one to get to. Sometimes I still lose that myself, but then it gives me a chance to find it again. This is the mystery of our faith, right? That suffering does not mean the absence of God. It might actually be the place where God is most fully with us in the hard times of our life, in the moments that we don't expect that hit us like a gut punch, like this and so many other things, right? I'm not just talking about the tragedies that we see in the news right now or anything. I'm talking about the hard times that we go through all the days of our lives that I've, alluded to or, mentioned in this video, right? But again, friends, there is hope in the resurrection. The cross is only part of the story, right? 3 days later came that resurrection, and that changes everything. It reminds us that death doesn't win, that suffering isn't the end, that every child who has died is not lost forever, but lives in the presence of a God who loves them more than we ever could, right? And, the Apostle Paul reflects on that much too. Romans 8, for I am conceived that neither death nor life nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ our Lord. We hold tightly to that rope too when we say our creed. Our church at Faith UMC, we recite the Apostles' Creed in all of our worship services, every week. We affirm the resurrection of the body, the life everlasting, and the communion of saints, all with us together, you know. And I, truly do. I believe that, these 27, campers and the 90 other people who have died in these floods are not gone. They are now part of the eternal community of God, and their spirits will be with us forever. Maybe I hope and pray in the long run. It takes time to get there, mind you, but hopefully in the long run, encouraging us all to be the best that we can be and live to help others as much as we possibly can as Jesus did. And Jesus, crucified and risen, is the promise that our pain will not have the last word. That's what we believe as Christians in one way or another. Some people, have different iterations as it comes through, but ultimately that is what so many who follow this person, Jesus, and this God believe. And I would say that, the alternative is a life without faith. And in my opinion, that life is far less fruitful because you're saying, a life without faith in God does not remove the suffering, right? So it's not to say if you lose your faith in God or, don't keep your faith in anything like that, if you were, choosing to reject all of this, it only removes the hope, right? A person who walks through their life without faith of some kind is going to feel even more alone when that suffering eventually comes, right? It's almost like saying, how would it feel to go through the pain you're going through without any person that you love? People are going through that too, right? I got to imagine that's a less fulfilling journey, right? Without faith, pain has, I don't know, no meaning. Without faith, there's, no one to cry out to or cry with when we feel crushed. But with faith, even faith that doubts, that trembles, that questions, we discover that grief can be held by grace, right? Our grief share group that does very good work at the church works on that every single time they meet. Right now, they're only meeting, once a month on the last Wednesdays of the month, but eventually, as the year resumes in the fall, they will start meeting weekly, and that is exactly what they're trying to, work through, right? Uh, Discovering that the grief that they are going through can be held by grace. It can help them get through that time. God will be with us all the way through. So, what do we do in the face of tragedies like this and so many others in our world? As Christians, we're going to weep with those who weep. We refuse to explain away pain with any kind of, cliche. We're going to, work on, preventing this kind of thing in the future. And I pray that, any kind of social service down there in the state of Texas, no matter, and I don't want, politics to get in, mixed into all of that. I want everyone from the local government all the way up to the federal government to take this seriously and say, how can we better, our landscape for everybody so that events like this don't happen in the future? How are we going to do it better and keep more people safe? That's a question we need to have as Christians, too. Same can be said for this woman who's reaching out to me about, people who pass away from cancer like her son. How are we going to improve our research, and pray to God that God brings us answers through science and medical treatment. We're going to encourage that as Christians, right? And, try and bring a sense of healing. That's what we're going to do. That's a calling in the Bible. Or sometimes, not even with the specifics like that, sometimes it's just about showing up with a casserole to share over a meal, with prayer, or just with silence. We live differently with more compassion, more justice, and more mercy. And we choose to believe not in a God who spares us all from pain, but in a God who walked through it with his son Jesus, who bore it and rose again to tell us that love and peace win. And it's on us to make sure, as vessels of the Holy Spirit, that we are called to be, to make sure that that is brought to this lady, to the people of Texas, going through this loss. I just sat down this morning with a fellow pastor in the area and of Stroudsburg, and we're going to talk about how we're going to improve outreach depots, and we're talking. I was talking to him about some of the things that we're going to do here at Faith. I'm going to be very soon in touch with the person who coordinates our St. Stephen's ministry and how we're going to build on that outreach and see what we can do. Maybe sending just money to Texas through the United Methodist Church's disaster relief agency. It's called UMCOR, by the way, UMCOR. That's what if you just type it into Google, it'll come right up. But if you're looking for a way to just maybe give some money, the United Methodist Committee on Relief is an excellent organization to give to. They already have representatives who are down in Texas assessing the damage and trying to coordinate relief and aid and everything. And so I look forward to, seeing what we as a church can do to help our brothers and sisters from a distance, right? Again, weeping with those who weep, refusing to explain away pain, showing up for them, sending them love and care from afar, saying that we are with you and we love you and we can't imagine what you're going through, but here's all the love we can possibly give to you. So, again, as I close all this, how can we believe in God when a child dies? Because God's child died too. And because Jesus and his death and resurrection, we find not easy answers, but the deepest possible hope that we have. And if you're struggling with this right now, if you're still watching this and thinking, Jack, I don't think I can accept that, I'm just still struggling, know that God is not offended by your questions, right? God welcomes them, and so do I. Confront those things, ask the questions so that we can journey further and further and maybe find more faith together. And we'll walk through them together, right? Thank you for being part of this. Friends, I just say as I close this time, stay strong, stay rooted, and stay tender. And be in continued prayer for our friends down south and everywhere else, anywhere else that needs to be lifted up. That is my hope for all of us. Please continue to reflect on those things. Why don't I share a prayer? You can just, bow your head, close your eyes, or maybe just fold your hands, whatever way you feel comfortable in praying. Or sometimes, my knees are kind of short here, but sometimes you can just open your hands and, lay your arms turned on your lap to, show that you're receiving God and receiving the Holy Spirit. That's a good way to pray too. But just be in that time of prayer. Here we go. Gracious and loving God, I thank you for the blessings that we share with those we love and those we care about, and I ask that you continue to send us those wonderful blessings. Enable us to go and be your hands and feet in disasters like this or sad times that other people are going through, losses through multiple ways, through, sickness or illness or terrible tragedies, naturally or not so much. Be with them. Surround them with this peace that can surpass all understanding and allow us to accept the fact that you walk through this with us because you gave up your only son for us. And help us to know that that can save us and bring us salvation and enable us to go and bring that joy and love and hope and the other fruits of the Spirit to everyone who needs to hear them. Be with us now as we go from this place into our lives and guide us with these beliefs, knowledge, and philosophy all the days of our lives. And that kind of dedication, that kind of persistence will guide us as you do and have always and always will. And now I pray the prayer that your beautiful Son, Jesus, who gave himself up for us, taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Friends, I thank you for joining me here today. I thank you for listening to this video. And if you have any more questions that you'd like me to respond to, please submit them or reach out to me through one of the channels that we have. And let's continue to grow in our faith together. With all that shared, blessings and keep the faith. We'll see you later.